Hi guys, it's Danny. Welcome to another Casual Sundays. My sickness is almost gone, so I can talk. I'm so happy. Alrighty, today we're going to discuss about orchids who kill off their roots if disturbed. And yes, I'm looking at you, Cattleya orchids. Now, I think this is slightly a taboo subject or something that people don't want to hear or something that people debate upon. I don't know. I'll make a discussion on it. And after the discussion, it's really up to you to choose and to experiment and to observe. So alrighty, the theory is some orchids, particularly Sympodial orchids and particularly Cattleya orchids, tend to kind of kill off their roots when you repot them. If you let inside the media some old roots, they will die eventually, pretty soon. And when I say kill off, I actually mean kill off. It's not that you damage them, they're not viable anymore. The Cattleyas actually kill them off. And bear with me, I'll explain. Righty, so a few words on Sympodial orchids and how they grow. They produce a rhizome and practically, periodically, they produce a new cane or a new pseudobulb. This is their way of growing, propagation, developing, and so on. Sympodial orchids all do this. Monopodial orchids like Vandas and Phalaenopsis do not do this because they do not have pseudobulbs or cane. They just have a central axis and that's it. Now, as you know, the new growths, the new pseudobulbs or canes, always produce a new root system. I have an example here. While the older canes or pseudobulbs stop producing roots and actually serve as deposits, they just feed the new growth that actually creates a brand new healthy root system. Now, what I've discovered with Cattleya orchids in particular, but they're not the only ones, I'll show you some examples, is that when you have a Cattleya orchid that is full of roots, you're super happy, it's healthy, you pluck it out of its media, clean the roots, you put it in fresh new media, you don't cut any root because it's healthy and viable. In a short while, you're gonna start to have some trouble because somehow the roots died. What did you do wrong? I'll tell you, nothing. You didn't do anything wrong. I'll tell you what happens in my experience and in my opinion. Okay, so what happens is this orchid intentionally cuts the energy supply for the old roots and actually focuses on the newer roots. And when I say new roots, I mean the roots that are just growing, like this case, or the roots coming from the last grown pseudobulb or cane. All the other roots are practically killed off by the mother plant. Now, why does an orchid do this? What reason might it have? Because it wants to survive. Why kill off its roots? Well, I have only one guess, and it's a pretty damn good one. Well, it's a known fact that orchids can adapt their roots accordingly to their environment. If they have a humid media or environment, their roots will be adapted to withstand that humid environment. If they have a dry environment, the roots will be adapted to a drier environment. I'll take a little break and I'll show you a visible example. Here is the Cattleya orchid. Look inside the pot. These roots that are adapted to withstand a more humid environment, practically they're in the bark, they're all fuzzy and nice, look like Paphiopedilum roots, but take a look at the roots that are aerial. They do not have any fuzz whatsoever. Now, this is a visible change, but most of the times we do not see this change and adaptation in orchid roots. This, however, is the perfect example to show this. So that is one of the reasons why an orchid does not consider its old roots viable anymore. Maybe you change the type of media you're using. But there's another reason more important than this. An orchid can actually feel when it's disturbed. You do not need to damage the roots. As you know, roots tend to attach a little bit to the sides of the pot. When you move them a bit, they will feel they're not attached anymore. Also, they will be attached to the media and arranged in a certain way. When you move them about, they will feel something's wrong. Now, the orchid, as I was saying, feels something changed, and rather than spend its energy on still feeding those roots, which might be damaged or might not be suited for the new environment, it actually kills them off and spends its energy on the new roots, which inevitably will be adapted better to the new environment, the new change, and so on. The orchid does not know you repotted it. It just thinks it's on a tree and it fell and something changed and it needs to adapt to the change because it does not know what the change exactly is. That's what I think, at least. So imagine if the orchid kept its old roots, she would spend energy on those old roots which might perform at 40% or 50% of their capacity while spending energy on the new roots and so on. No, it's not a viable solution. Let us just kill off the old roots, preserve energy, and focus everything on new roots which will perform 100%, rather than keep the ones that perform 30-40%. At least this is the logic that I see in my head for this behavior, and if there is such a thing as plant psychology, I think this is how it works. Of course, it's not as complicated as a human being, but you cannot really mess with hundreds of thousands of years of evolution in the plant world. So I'm just trying to translate a little bit the behavior of an orchid. This is why I think particularly Cattleya orchids, but not only them, do what they do. They have this unique way of growing, of actually multiplying through canes and pseudobulbs. A monopodial orchid does not do that. A monopodial orchid, because it does not have these storage devices called pseudobulbs, stores energy and moisture and all of that in its roots actually. This is why they're so plump. Of course it stores it in the leaves as well, but they're kind of flimsy compared to pseudobulbs, aren't they? So for a monopodial orchid, this type of behavior would be detrimental. Why kill off so many roots when you know you're not actually gonna put out as many roots as a Sympodial orchids? You're gonna be left with these types of roots. Of course, in time they do regenerate as well, but the rate of regeneration is really not as fast, is really not as severe as a Sympodial orchid. I think the only explanation is that it's a monopodial orchid. It does not have storage devices like a Sympodial orchid. Not to that extent, at least. So this is why I've actually never encountered this behavior on Phalaenopsis, Vandas, and other monopodial orchids. Now, speaking about the Cattleyas, which I find the most notorious at doing this, I had a discussion with one of my viewers these days, and somehow I mentioned that, you know what, cats tend to kill off their roots. And my viewer actually unpotted his Cattleya orchid, which he just repotted, that had an abundance of roots, and lo and behold, he discovered all the old roots dead. Every single one of them. Now, coincidentally, another one of my viewers, Anna, asked me this morning what she should do in the case of some orchids that she recently repotted 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she noticed the old roots, which were viable when she repotted, started to die off. And she was referring to cats and another type of orchid. Well, really, I would go back and redo the repotting. Those dead roots decomposing in the media are nothing but trouble. And if you've watched my previous Casual Sundays, you know that I suspect there is a link between rotting roots, bad media, and fungal infections on the upper part of the orchid. So yeah, I would just go back, cut away everything that's dying and that it's mushy, and just redo the whole repotting process once again. Now, Cattleyas are not the only ones to do this. Now, recently, I had to repot the Stanhopea marizana orchid because it started to smell really bad. I'll add an annotation on the screen so you see the repotting video. At the time, it had a ton of roots, and they were viable. They were absolutely fine. Well, what happened was they died. They were killed off. And actually, this orchid is producing a lot of new roots right now from this new growth. I'm not sure if I can actually show you. It has a lot of new roots with new growing tips. Also, this orchid is trying to put out a lot of new growth right now, probably to remake her root system. But yet again, this is an orchid that absolutely killed off her roots. And I'll show you. I actually repotted it recently. I didn't film it. But look at the mess of dead roots right there. Everything is completely dead. They might look white, but trust me, they're dead. So yeah, that's what the Stanhopea did. Again, Stanhopeas are Sympodial orchids, but there is a type of orchid which is Sympodial which doesn't really do this. And this is the Oncidium orchid. Now, Oncidiums, given, they will kill off some of the very old roots, but not as severe as Cattleya orchids. Cattleyas do kill off everything that's 1 year old, let's say. Oncidiums don't do this. In my experience, I didn't have cases like this. Oncidiums, what they're actually good at is to branch. They have roots that absolutely branch. Even the oldest roots, they branch out and continue living while the orchid produces new roots. Why they do this, I am not sure. I've never been to their natural habitat, but I'm sure there is a very good reason for this. So Oncidium orchids are not as harsh with their roots, I've discovered. than Cattleya orchids. Of course, if you have very, very, very old roots on your Oncidium, most probably eventually they will die. But the roots coming from the second to third pseudobulb, oldest pseudobulb, they will not be killed in my experience. They will actually live on and branch. Speaking about branching roots, Cattleya orchids are not very fond on branching. And here's an example. This is a Cattleya orchid with very visible roots. They're not very branchy, as you can see. They're just strains. So this type of orchid, actually, I think it prefers to produce new roots rather than keep her old roots and keep branching. Why it is adapted this way, I'm not sure, but I can definitely say there is a difference between the behavior of a Cattleya orchid and the behavior of an Oncidium orchid, which tends to branch a lot more than a Cattleya will. Now, if you don't disturb the old roots of a Cattleya, they will probably live on longer, but not too long. I have here an orchid which did not have its roots disturbed, but many very old roots are dead. So eventually, even if you don't disturb the older roots, they will die off because of this regeneration process. But they will not be killed as fast. Eventually they will die, but not as fast. So what I'm actually doing now whenever I repot Cattleya orchids is I actually cut away most of their roots. I cut away the roots that were produced, let's say, from the second oldest pseudobulb onwards to the oldest pseudobulb. I only leave the roots that have growing root tips. They tend to live. And also I leave alone the new roots that are just growing or are just produced by the newest pseudobulb. Everything that is old, I cut them away because I just had so many cases in which after a little while my media was spoiled and I had to redo the whole operation once again. Now, if you're not comfortable with cutting away so many roots on your orchids, don't do it. You don't have to follow my advice. I just present you the ideas to think about and to keep an eye out for. So if you're not comfortable with this, there's really no point in you losing sleep because you cut away too many roots. Just observe it and just see if this is actually true, if your orchids perform like this, and so on. But keep it in mind, if you have Cattleya orchids with a ton of roots, in a little while after you repot, just check that media, check for molds, smell the media, see if it went bad, because chances are it will kinda. So do keep that in mind. Other than that, why they do this, you know, they're just smart. Plants are smart. They just evolved for such a long time that they know very well what they're doing and why they're doing this. So keep that in mind, and I find it a very interesting thing that orchids do, particularly cats. I love cats. I love them. They have such a personality to them. If you think about this behavior like this, I really love them. And yeah, with Cattleya orchids, just be careful with the old roots. Alrighty guys, thank you so much for joining. Let me know what you think about this. Did you ever had issues like this? Did you ever observe an orchid that simply killed off its roots with no apparent reason after repotting? So do let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you have other suggestions or ideas for casual Sundays, let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to my channel for daily orchid videos. Feel free to ask me anything regarding orchids and I will try to help you out. If you click on the left side of your screen, you'll be directed to orchidnature.com, where you'll find care sheets, identification sheets, and also you can talk to us in the forum section. And also if you click on the right side of your screen, you'll watch another orchid video. Thank you for joining. I'll see you next time. Bye!